So I want to talk about the film Waves. Waves is a 2019 American drama film written, directed, produced, and co-edited by Trey Edward Schultz. It stars Kelvin Harris Jr., Lucas Hedges, Taylor Russell, Alexa Demi, Renee Elise Goldsberry. She's from Hamilton, and Sterling K. Brown. He's from the TV show Us. Set against the vibrant landscape of South Florida, it traces the emotional journey of a suburban family as they navigate love, forgiveness, and coming together in the aftermath of a loss. And there are spoilers in this, so if you don't want to know what the movie's about, as far as what exactly happens in the movie, then turn away now. So Tyler Williams is a popular high school senior on the wrestling team. Outside of school, he parties with his friends and spends time with his girlfriend Alexis, but is routinely pushed to be better by his domineering father, Ronald. Unbeknownst to anyone at school or home, Tyler suffers from a level 5 slap tear, which he keeps secret from his family and team by discreetly stealing his father's painkillers. Against the recommendation of his doctor, Tyler continues to wrestle competitively until he is violently thrown onto his shoulder during a match, causing irreparable damage and ending his season as well as his career. Tyler's life is further complicated when he receives a text from Alexis who reveals that she may be pregnant. He takes her to get a termination of the pregnancy, but she has a last-minute change of heart. On the way home, the couple has a fight, and Alexis walks home alone. Distraught, Tyler begins drinking heavily and abusing drugs at parties with his friends. And so basically, that's how the movie starts. And Tyler has a sister, Emily, who it seems in the movie is like a passive watcher at first. And I think the movie is done in 2 different sections. I would call the first section Tyler, and I would call the second section Emily. So at the beginning of the movie, the family's focus is mainly on Tyler because he's a year older in high school than Emily. I think that a lot is riding on his scholarship for wrestling and his going to college. And the fact that his father puts so much pressure on him and doesn't really leave a lot of room for error is why Tyler does not get the surgery that his doctor recommends for him to get. His father also makes it, clear to him that he is going to have to work harder because he is black. So the movie is about a black family, but the cast is culturally diverse, which I really liked. So, Tyler's father tells him there's no room for error because he has to work harder because he is black in America. And from my own personal life, my parents taught me and told me a lot of things that would happen because I was black, but they never told me that I would have to work harder, which I'm so grateful for. And to me, having to work harder in American society because you're Black is a trope that is told to a lot of kids. And I think Black parents think that they're doing a good thing, and they mean well when they tell their kids they're going to have to work harder. Even though it's true, I'm so grateful that my parents never told me that. Because when I got out into the workforce and I was already a hard worker just by nature, when it became clear that I was going to have to work even harder just to keep my job that I was already doing a great job at, I didn't think of it as something I needed to expect. I thought of it as something that was grossly unfair. So if it was something that my parents had told me, to just expect, I would have just taken it, but I didn't. I pushed against it. And that's the problem with this telling your children, your Black children, that they're going to have to work harder. You're doing them a disservice when you do that, even though you mean well. And that is part of the problem with Tyler. He already feels this immense pressure that's placed upon him, and it's a projection that his father has from his own life. Parents are very guilty of that as well. I think that baby boomers and some Gen Xers, I think mainly Gen Xers, want to save their kids from the hard time and the mistakes that they had to go through, when really kids need to make their own mistakes. And, if you can, you want to swerve them in a different direction. And so the father means well when he's telling Tyler this, but it's mentally grating on Tyler. So he can't take the fact that he needs the surgery. He's unable to cope with that news. And instead of going home and telling his parents this, the father hasn't created a safe space for it. His sister has. And she doesn't really have a voice. So she doesn't know how to go to her parents and tell them Tyler's struggling with something unknown. Then on top of that, he's got a girlfriend who wants to keep his baby. They're in high school. If the father could not process Tyler's wrestling career being over, he sure as hell couldn't process Tyler bringing a baby home. That was unthinkable to Tyler. He ruins things with the girlfriend. He becomes abusive, and she's healthy enough to know that she doesn't deserve that, and basically ends the relationship with him. He takes a descent into madness, because she finds somebody else to go to the prom with. He's sitting at home, drowning his sorrows in alcohol and drugs. He finds her at the after-party house of the prom. His sister is there. His sister again sees him, knows that something's wrong, but doesn't step in or intervene. Meanwhile, Tyler has a physical fight with his girlfriend. He doesn't mean for her to fall and hit her head in the garage on the concrete, but that's exactly what happens. And ultimately, Tyler is sent away for second-degree murder and is going to spend the next 30 years in prison. And it is one of the most tragic things that I've seen on film in a long, long time. But again, things like that happen in real life. There's a fight, there's a fist fight, and somebody falls, hits their head on the concrete. That's not, a death is not what was meant to happen, but a death is what occurred. And so somebody's life as they knew it is gone. And so next we see the second act, which is the story of Emily and how she deals with her brother's absence and the death of her brother's girlfriend, who she had a kind relationship with. She actually doesn't take her brother's side or doesn't empathize with him going to prison. She thinks he's a monster. And she's trying to get on with her life, but she's isolated at school and is grieving the death of her brother's girlfriend when she catches the eye of a young man who, unbeknownst to her, is going through his own issues. He's got a father that was not in his life, who was abusive, who's dying of cancer. And she urges him, well, they start a relationship. They slowly get to know each other. They obviously have a lot in common. They have a good time. And she urges him to go see the father. They take a road trip. It's summertime. And basically, he is able to tell his father, who was never there, goodbye in a very compassionate way, as it takes him days while he's in hospice to finally pass. He's able to forgive his father, and at the same time Emily is watching this, it's somewhat healing to her as well. Her family's falling apart. Her mother can't seem to forgive her father because she feels that the father pushed Tyler too much, which is true. But, ultimately, Tyler had a lot of choices he could have made. And even though he was pushed so hard by the father, it was his choice to not reach out for help. It was his choice to take this descent. And Emily starts to live the life that Tyler was living before his life took that tragic turn. When the movie opens, it's Tyler and his girlfriend in the car doing what normal teens do, having a good time. They're in love. They're happy. So after Tyler goes to prison, Emily finds her voice. Emily finds herself. Emily falls in love. Emily makes different choices, more empathetic, more compassionate, more selfless choices than the ones that Tyler made. So that those choices rest upon Emily the same way they rest upon Tyler. Neither of their needs were getting met in their household, but they both made different choices. And so it's just a very tragic story, but there is healing, and at the end there is ultimately optimism and happiness. And these events are things that could happen in real life, and that's what makes it so poignant. It's a movie that's very emotional. I cried a few times in it. The acting is that raw, that real. Emily's boyfriend forgiving his father, who was never there, who was basically a jerk, and one could argue didn't forgive didn't deserve forgiveness is what wrecked me the most. And Emily, watching that, I think ultimately she was able to forgive her brother, which allowed her to heal and freed her. And that's what forgiveness is for. It's not for the other person, it's for you. The mother, after some time, forgave the father. And the last scene is of Emily freely riding her bike on a sunny day down the road. Because life goes on. Because if you let it, it has to. Okay. Please like and subscribe. Thanks, bye.